Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to be walking through a recent cookbook that I published, which is all about automated metadata enrichment. And this is going to be quite a short video because it's a very simple process, but let me walk you through it. The main idea here is that we have a set of documents and we want to be able to populate a certain style or certain type of metadata for each of those documents. So for that, we're going to be creating what I've called the metadata enricher. You can call it whatever you like. And long story short, the metadata enricher will be accepting a list of documents, like you can see here, and then it will be populating metadata, the same metadata for each of those documents. So let's assume that we have field 1 and field 2. But the nice thing about this is we're going to be using the structured outputs functionality by OpenAI. So we're actually going to be able to provide our own metadata model, our own structure, and we're going to be able to populate our metadata based off of this. So for example, let's assume we want to be able to extract company and year from each of the documents. We provide this type of structure to our metadata enricher, and then that means we can ensure that we are extracting company and year from each of those documents. So without further ado, let's start. So what I'm going to be talking about today is already available in the Haystack cookbooks. You'll find it here. It's the third one, Advanced RAG Automated Structured Metadata Enrichment. So you can go there and then you can also open it in Colab and run through this with me. I already have it open, so let's go there. Everything is already installed, but one thing I want to point out, similar to the previous video I shared, is that I'm going to be using the structured output functionality by OpenAI, which is not a default functionality we have in the OpenAI generator for Haystack yet. There is an issue tracking this. I'm going to link that in the description as well, so you can leave a comment there. But what I've done here is I've simply extended the OpenAI generator that we already have to be able to use the structured outputs functionality. I'm not going to go through that code. What you do have to know is that you simply have to provide the structure with which you want OpenAI to respond with. And here I'm going to be using a pydantic model, and then OpenAI will respond with that structure in place. I've already defined my OpenAI key as well. Make sure you do that too. First thing first, we have to create our metadata enricher. The beauty about Haystack is that if we do not have one of the components you need in place, it's very, very simple to create your own custom component, which is exactly what I've done here. What you need in place is a class with a component decorator. The class needs to have an init and it needs to have a run method. The run method then is going to be returning whatever the component should be returning at runtime as a dictionary. So let's see what we have to have in place here. So the way I've created this component is that it expects a metadata model. So in my case, I'm using a pydantic model. This is the structure with which we want the LLM to reply with. And also I've provided the prompt. You could have this in the init itself. I've made it so that it's a default prompt that you can override if you like. So let's initialize both of those. And then we're going to be using a Haystack prompt builder. The funny thing about this component is it actually wraps a Haystack pipeline in itself. This pipeline is populating a document with given metadata. So the prompt builder is expecting this prompt where the way we've described it is, given the contents of the documents, extract the requested metadata. The requested metadata is, and then we provide the model, and the document is, we provide the document. Next, we're using the OpenAI generator that I have extended to be able to use this metadata model, and it expects that in generation queries, response format, metadata model. So this is ensuring that whatever the user has provided as the model to the metadata enricher, OpenAI can use to respond in. And then I simply create a pipeline. I called it pipeline, not very creative. I add my two components and I connect my two components. So I have this pipeline ready, and when this component is used, i.e. when it's run, we want to make sure that we're running this pipeline for each document that the component has been given. So the component at runtime is expecting a list of documents or document type in Haystack. And I'm going to be returning documents with meta, which is right now an empty list. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looping through each of these documents. And then for each document, I'm going to be running the pipeline. I'm going to be providing the prompt builder with the contents of the document. We are expecting that here. And I'm also going to be providing it with the metadata model for the LLM. Finally, I've got my metadata in the reply from the large language model. In my implementation of the OpenAI generator, if the user is asking for a structured output based off of a certain model, I'm returning that as a structured reply, even though it is in replies as well. And I'm simply adding that to my already existent meta field of each document. And that's basically it. So let's initialize, let's run that. And for this example, what I'm going to be doing is I've got two URLs that you'll see in a bit, which contains information about certain fundraising rounds. So I've just made this up. I'm calling my Pydantic model metadata, and I have 4 metadata fields that I want to be able to extract. Company as string, year, funding value, and funding currency. What I like about the structured outputs functionality is that you can also make sure that the large language model is returning the types that you expect as well. So let's do that. And we create our component. I'm calling it the enricher. Okay, so now we want to be able to see this thing in action. So let's have a look. We have a component, which is a pretty useful component called the link content fetcher. Which means that I don't have to bother with any indexing pipeline and indexing and embedding my documents somewhere, which is great. For this small example, it works well. I do need to then convert those to a format that Haystack can use. So we use the HTML to document converter for that. And finally, we're going to be using our enricher. I add those components to my pipeline, and then finally I connect them. And another useful functionality is that then you can visualize this pipeline to make sure that it looks the way you expect it to look. Everything seems fine here, and I have chosen 2 companies as my victims here. One of these URLs is talking about the DeepSet funding round, and the other one is talking about the Arise AI funding round. So let's run that, and it's going to look like a lot, but we'll get to see the metadata that's been created. So let's have a look. There's this document, there's a lot of content around that document, so you can see that it's been shortened, and then let's see the meta field. The meta field contains the stuff that the link content fetcher would have already added by default, but as you can see, it also has the extra that I asked for: company, year, funding value, and funding currency. And the same for Arise AI. We have the metadata that the link content fetcher would have added to our document already, as well as the ones that I've asked for. And that's basically it. It's a very simple process, but it is quite powerful. And the nice thing is, even though there is no metadata enricher in Haystack right now, we are able to create our own. I want to end this with 2 things. There's an extra bit in this cookbook that you can see to observe how this type of metadata can be inherited. We get a lot of questions around document splitting. Let's say you have a main document, such as the one above here about the DeepSet funding round. What happens to the metadata if you were to split that document into smaller chunks? And here you can see how all of that metadata does in fact get inherited by the child chunks. And lastly, I want to talk about the Haystack experimental package. Here you have the repository for the Haystack experimental package, which gets installed with Haystack by default. One of the latest experiments we added is actually the LLM metadata extractor. So this is super new. It's going to be very similar to what I've just shown you, but it's still under development. So if you want to take part in discussing about this component and what kind of features you'd like to see in them, you'll see a discuss link appear here, which will take you to the discussions we have for each experiment that we're running. So if you'd like to check that out, please do. Thank you very much, and hope you have a lovely weekend.